Hello and welcome back to my Empire of Japan Let's Play. Right now we're getting ready to finish the first quarter report while also hopefully getting ready to finish our raid on the warehouse that might figure out what the Navy is doing with all of the contracts they've been hiding. We have Armory Reserve Training. To get that a bit better, and probably want to start building some military factories. We'll drop a bunch there, a bunch there, and a bunch there. The tense cracks. Kadari and Tachi entered the building, guns raised, and were greeted by nothing but deathly signs. Flickering bulbs swung overhead, casting dim lighting on the concrete walls. Tall walls of stacked crates filled the warehouse, and soon the patter of rain on the roof filled the silence the complex that offered them. Find anything? Got nothing on my side, radio cleared Tachi. Soft static reported on the walls. No, I have not found anything yet either. Tachi shining such on as he stumbled upon finding nothing but some pen and paper. Damn, Makabai, these guys really cleared everything out. Esmeralda has taken all of himself and left, pursuing through the filing cabinets without success. Tachi came here, I found something. Karen was now staring at a rusted metal door, its window blocked up by the wooden planks. What I found is now been willing to budge. Let me handle this, stated Tachi. A simple kick inside the door, flying sideways, fumbling, and the team found themselves in dark hallway. The air mostly is for riddle damp with puddles. Its stench was felt like pudding rice, and the noise like scampering rats. Something wasn't right. Something definitely wasn't right. Quiet, they're here. Right, first quarter report is done. Gloria, this year we finally done that Japan has dredged up the poor faltering nations under the boot of the West and lifted them up through economic growth and great prosperity. Standards of living are at an all-time high, and technology continues to push forward without relenting, while the two other thirds of the world are crawling in the mud and suffering. Japan's great economic system, dusty ages, and bring bounty. TNO Hekai Banzai, TNO Teko Banzai, word I'm not going to try to pronounce Banzai. Political power, more efficiency growth, and more factory output. See, yeah, we have like no free cash. We have an annual deficit of, okay. Tracking the skull with the burst of gunfire, small fragments of metal shot across the room when the deadly display of lights that seized the attention of Chachi's eyes. He darted his head downwards and raised his arms in a frustrated haze, shaken by a sudden spurt of metal and gunpowder. The echoes and cracks of the bullets bounced around the room, his skull over and over, hammering and grinding at the back of his eyes, painful. All thrown to the ground, touched his mouth around dry as he tried to return his vision to the darkened room around him and make sense of the violent chaos around him. The clatter of metal on metal ached through the room, and the walls of the IGNA crumbles grew louder. Tachi, still mobilized and reduced to the ground, tumbled and dragged himself by some scattered debris. Could barely make out the dark figures dashing between shapes, screaming as he fired bullets and heckled. He gulped again. The stuffy heat strangled him into the thumping headache as he stretched his tense muscles on the floor. The roar of gunfire grew louder for a moment, and then ended with a great thump and a giggle of empty shells around. Tachi was still shaken by the tremors encounter, and his heart raced in the moment when he lost control of breath and his vision. The bloody hammer falls. Okay. Yeah, that civilian spending is not super great. Alright, Tachi blinked his eyes many times over and reached for something to stabilize his position. The buzzing white noise ringing in his ears began to quieten, and the pounding pains of his head had deepened as he caught his breath. He exhaled deeply and his body descended into a calmer state. Tachi lifted himself from the ground as he reached to pat down the smears of soot on his clothes as he collected from the grooming floorboards. After the wailing crackling of gunfire ended, Tachi could only hear the shuffling of feet over and across the room in desperate search for many criminals or evidence. With great beaming torches and silver alloy guns, law enforcement officers glided around the room in small groups and yelled for the surrender of any remaining survivors. Met with no replies, Kadora slid into the room soon after and he approached the conflict-shaken detective. He stood stiller than a rock as he looked over the dead sprawling on the ground. Tachi almost missed the charm of blood slipping over his head, did not notice the brutal, mangled bodies that laid across the floor adjacent to where he was immobilized. His eyes were wide and fixed as he gazed at the corpses shoot up by small arms fire, realizing the horrendous implications of such brutality of the investigation. Instead of gunpowder and blood raised Hachi's nose hairs, but he did not react to the violent aftermath of the hysteric buzz of the shock froze him in place. Kari cleared his throat, patting Tachi on the back. He pulled over the pack to offer the detective a cigarette, but not to speak of the deafening sound that cheered, put into that in that moment. A bittersweet victory. Yeah, okay, that's not... Okay, recovering from the unrecoverable. Oh no. The light of dawn hit the base, but stayed still. Corpses laying on the ground, covered with blood as they fought for the last moment. Not until the noon that the Shina's peace set in place. There was no more need for fighting. Now's the time for collecting the bodies in mourning. Not just the mourning casualties, but the implication of the casualties. The raid had failed and the department had lost. Justice would not shine even in the death of the forebears. There was little hope at this point. All detectives could do was try to move on, as hard as it may seem. They would continue to fight even if it killed them. The military officers were doubly excited and terribly disappointed. They covered their deaths, but at what cost? At what cost to their legacy? At what cost to their troops? That's most importantly, at what cost to the enemies. They had intention to exploit, but not murder. They weren't looking for a war. They were looking for money, plain and simple. The bodies are buried quiet ceremonies. The reason for death is not given, but healthy pension is given to the families of the deceased. The investigation is dead. Well, that's not good. Burying them in. 100 funerals were planned on both sides. There were those regarded as heroes and those as villains. Vigils of companions and comrades attended each one. Silent and mourning, rain pelted on the tears of some above. Quietness settled upon it all. There was time for violence, but there was time to reflect on the pessimism of the past, the actions of the present, and the optimism of the future. Dang. Okay. Um. Surveying the wreckage. From the outside, the building looked as though it had been in perfect condition. There was little that bellied the horrid interior, but a few bullet holes scattered on the facade. Inside was a mess of scattered paper, ashes, and bodies rotting in the humid air. Rodents scrambled about looking for a cut of the meat. Few expeditions had been conducted to gain bodies, but nothing more. The walls of the base still lay untrodden since the siege. They smelled of rotting and flesh. The unknown called to no one. Zero volunteered to see what was inside. Eventually, a squirmy officer was pushed in. He emerged, stinking to the same stench of those rooms, brought news of what lay inside. The file cabinets were empty. The evidence inside vanished. They would not do. The police could have gotten not have got a hold of them. They will not. This room smells like death and missing evidence. Okay, that's civilian budget boost is about to disappear. Right, the officials were feared. Even though the raid was resolutely failed, the detectives had gotten away with too much. They were sure whether the police would even put it all together. They weren't gambling on it. Action must be taken quick. One raid wouldn't set this whole house of cards stumbling down. What? Let's see. When this ends, how does that change? The wall is finished. The Williams mess was blown over for the most part. The second wall had been almost completed. The last few safety checks were finished, which found the ground to finally be safe for proper construction. Compared to the seemingly gargantuan task of ensuring stability, the extra putting together of the well went swimmingly. Finally, operations of the second well could begin. Only a small shadow of economic abuse swirling over it. Once a quiet place grew louder with the sound of industry and of toil, with two machines pumping oil from the earth. Supposedly, his business was starting to become even more productive and profitable. For him, the second well was exactly what he needed it to be. Meaning, the entire process of getting oil he had subsidized had been arduous and not without harm to his personal image. Still, oil was ever valuable. Eventually, drawn out some of the criticism of the Prime Minister and its useful purpose. As the time went on, the oil well began to produce other positive results. Local economies started to diversify slightly, and the necessary transporting vast quantities of oil brought the modernization of the rail port. It occurred a little too late to mitigate opinions of the Prime Minister. All that for 5 oil. Rotten soldiers and moneyed chips. Day by day, the crowd gathered around the headquarters of the army and the navy grew. Since the press release, the public had been in arms. There was a day that passed without an attack on a high military officer. Police officers could no longer intervene. Hate was mutual. The internal police was fighting for its life. The IJA and the IJN were all intents and purposes dead in water. Itachi could have been celebrating up to this point. The prime target had been proven demonstrably guilty, but two lingering issues haunted them. Two loose ends begging for resolution. The first was drawn from the use of several code words drawn by the conversations of various military staff. Names of infamous cultural landmarks, Karabuda, Kyoto Golden Temple, and Kyoto Temple. All code word owners were spoken in different tones and appeared to have pulled strings behind the string pullers, but the transactional traceable to these code word accounts did not correspond to the Army or Navy. In fact, the Imperial General Headquarters appeared to be innocent, so who was above the headquarters? The second was this, the Army and the Navy. The civilian government's biggest enemies were busy collapsing, so why were the civilians of the government falling to pieces with them? Why did anyone really know the answer? I don't like where this is going. So it was the government itself the whole time. That was kind of obvious, I feel, though, but The private commission. The press room was ranked from consecutive days of public hearings, but not from threat or exhaustion. The scent of fear was heady. And it was everywhere. The team wore expressions of children with their hands caught deep in the cookie jar, ironic given the circumstances, but nobody was laughing. Gray's speech was short to the point of curtness. To prevent further internal inference, a private commission will be set up with the facilitation of Tokyo Metropolitan and granted extraordinary powers to search, arrest, and interrogate across all branches of government. It was the will of the emperor, and here we pause for emphasis that the investigation reached just conclusions. Scarcely had the meeting ended with a note was passed to him by his staffer. It was impossible to even catch this spring outline in the crowd of journalists. Gray opened the note, noting the letterhead. Stop before you are encircled and sword. Your fight was brave, but ends here. We are watching. Yours the thousand temples. Baffled, he raised his head just in time to catch Toyo's cry. Right, our leads in the Navy are in trouble. Orders from the Diet. Scientific, what? Where in the hell is that? Glory to the sphere. Let's go ahead and do more civilian, decrease military, and liquid reserves. Alright. As the team hastily reassembled their work, damage reports confirmed the worst. Some of the purge was taking place in the Army and Navy ministries. It was being directed not by the command staff, but by the dazing heights of civilian bureaucracy. Some of their prominent leads had been caught up in chaos. Something was very wrong. Clear Touch was running out of time. Crisis meetings stretched until long hours. Many on the team had let their unspoken fears take hold of them and wanted to shut down the investigation before their own heads wound up on executive platters. What emerged was the consensus that the work had been done quickly as possible to attempt to outflank the government. Rest warrants and lists of suspects were hastily compiled, and the team divided into ministry sections to tackle each list and hit the government as hard as they could. They couldn't manage a full sweep of the thousand temples. They could at least nab some of them to kill the momentum. Nobody said the obvious, but it was that their minds were going. Time was the only insurance they had left, and the result had come in before they were arrested. The police had 99% conviction rate, even for their own men. We're working for our lives. Oh wait, almost forgot. Riches continue. Now that we have solved our economic problems, we can focus on more pressing matters such as the military or social policy. The system we built is a troublesome foundation, but there shouldn't be concern for us now. It'll take years until the cracks start to show, and by then we'll have much more position to work on the underlying issues. Until then, we can lie back and enjoy the splendid results of our little kikaku. I feel like it's not going to be that much longer, but you know. So what's America doing? They were helping out a friend, but let's see. They went with the Kennedy plan. They went get our hand dirty. Alright, and over here. So they went against us, but alright, no one was sure when the low-grade civil war brewing in the Diet and the imperial government at large was pointing to a simmer, but somehow the worst had passed. Nobody knew why, but most of the team were thankful that the world around them remained somewhat intact even as the military fell apart. It was reassuring to know that Japan had become a military state and was in fact increasingly unlikely to do so given the state of its armed forces. One evening, a letter was received from the Imperial General Headquarters, an anonymous typescript and generic government issued letterhead. It was similar to the content to countless other missiles received that week, all of which were ordered the team to cease and desist under the pretext of protecting the dignity of the Emperor. What was different was that came after the signature of the letter read, like a who's who of the most powerful members of the Imperial government, senior members of the Diet and the Cabinet, the Army and the Navy, the headquarters itself had all pinned signatures in person. Mysterious files indicate that half these individuals were boiled in intrudes against each other in the upper haven of the government chambers. If this were the case, how come they all ended up signing the same petition? Answer arrived in the form of a team from the headquarters the following week, pushing a warrant for the immediate audit for the treason activities against the Emperor. As they searched the office, ignoring the cries of already overburdened investigating team, I found that there weren't the seals of half a dozen major ministerial appointments, but above them was the thick and sealed seal of the Kusugai Council, and that was clear to everyone the thousands of war. Why the government closed its ranks? What could have been done to stop them, however? My God, how deep does this run? Trail from on high. Everyone knew that the Bureau of Public Order, in theory, of the civilian police resistance to the Emperor, was in reality a fair-weather friend of their juniors. Bureau seldom did its assigned work these days, focusing instead on the arcane power games and the Byzantine structure of the Empire. Even so, nobody had quite expected the about face the Bureau now made. In order crafted to maximize humiliation, the Bureau essentially dressed down the entire team for acting above their pay grade, station status before the Emperor. This was fairly normal treatment and to be expected. As far as the team was a blunt demand of the corpus of the investigation, and that's all, to be moved to the Bureau headquarters separate for an indefinite period. Government reasons cited were the preservation of the dignity of the government and the Emperor, as well as the need to safeguard potentially sensitive data, unsurprising but effective. Sorry, uninspiring but effective. The ordinary circumstances of the order ordered them to stop could at least have been published, but this order was classified so highly that the race would have been an immediate death sentence for most of Qatari Tachistine was outward and an impediment of justice, but you could admire the handiwork. Busy confused, the team halted work, and instead of seeing with right hand was drafted, redrafting, and hesitantly sent to the shredder before it could do any harm. Stabbed in the back, and they're to blame. Basic battleship all and improve. Ooh, we got a bunch of stuff done all at once. The government lockdown in Qatari was tired, even though the stands of the maturing police of the Joel of the East, a sleepless man for a sleepless city, dancing on the edge of collapse. Investigation and months of it seems time appeared to be slipping into the gutter. There was little he could do to stop it. He reminded of the old stories of children playing with gods, pretending at equal status. Poured through the document, seals of the letter, corresponding to the senior position of government, which seemed to have come from somewhere else. And also the seals imprints with its just wax used for financial purposes. Why would the letter have been stamped with accounting seals rather than executive ones? What does it mean for the investigation? A cursory result of the invoicing records the team had captured and it revealed nothing. All the seals had been appropriate, corresponding to the senior executive whose name they had already knew on the mystery slated for audit. Next to the contracts they captured revealed nothing as well. His identity and function eluded him. Jai worked through the night, chasing the paperwork and expanding spirals. By the next morning, he had to answer for the very confused Tachi. The seals of letters had been found in Zinki's records they seized in the fishing factory. The curious thing was that the seals hadn't been found in the isolated one or two places. Out of the 370 documents used by the initial investigation, 320 of them had matched for one or more seals used. Had slipped past the initial investigation, most government firms had ministerial seals for documented approval but could no longer be ignored. The government wasn't above the scandal. It was right here in the mud with the rest of them. Alright. Mean we can upgrade our... Ooh, never mind. So it's not upgraded here. I don't know. Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll focus on... Okay, yeah, these are ahead of time, but it's fine because we've got some boosts. Okay, we're not producing anti-air for some reason. Are we seriously not producing any anti-air? Okay. Yeah, let's fix this. Okay. We trained Tachi and Rumeri middlemen tactics and hostile negotiating seminars, but Tachi had never expected to use them like this. Two teams of the most powerful agencies in Japan were snapping at each other, with members of his own team so trying to get both sides to stand down. And hence the holsters, the police department held its breath. The Imperial General Headquarters had sent a team of specialist bureaucrats to commandeer what evidence could be taken to safeguard it from the Emperor's protection in a facility guarded by themselves. It was unfortunate that they'd happened to meet a team from the Bureau of Public Order sent to commandeer what evidence could be taken from the exact same purpose. Then they glared at each other. The teams had practically throwing warrants at each other in an effort to prove that the other was inferior in carrying out the Imperial's will. Looking at the two of them touching on dead, didn't the art of war that enemies were best defeated when divided? Didn't they possess significant reserves of evidence that everyone wanted, but only one agency could keep? Pan formed his mind that pressing through the rest of the day a full-blown strategy could be pulled off survival. What would be possible, and some hope was better than none. Divide, conquer, survive. Chinks in the armor. At this point, the team was so used to overnight meetings called an hour's notice that scarcely anyone really cared about the infringement on personal time. Between the 10 or so members gathered only a couple of children, and all were so exhausted by the investigative error that few had actually visited their parents in months. Even so, they hoped perhaps this would be the last push, the final struggle to some imagined victory. As the details were laid out, the flickering lights of the room, that only one grew. Kari and Tachi were on his team for the umpteenth time, focusing on three major conflict vectors under the ragged imperial umbrella: the Bureau of Public War, the Diet, and the Army and Navy. Matter was undergoing a full-scale internal reorganization, complete with occasional gunfight but still possessed enough eternal cohesion to be a potential threat to the other two. The plan was simple at heart: turn the three agencies against each other in such a way that conflict would escalate and spill into the courts, forcing the release of the documents in Egypt. The Trojan horse lay ready for the entrance into three separate Troys. A series of invoices with seals from all three agencies, with Mzinki logistics, army money, navy shipping, more than enough to nab all three. Just enticing enough to convince each agency to fight for the other two for ownership. If all three agencies were to seduce at the same time, Touchy smiled. It's time to turn the government upside down. One last roll of the dice. A beloved Camilla Lady, the orchestra opening brought a somber mood to the audience in the bar. Even for those who were already extremely drunk, Maji faced the audience, any fear of leaving her husband to sing, and no signs of pain with her heart torn apart, no one how many tears Camilla Lady cried. He saw me in many eyes to were told the story of Camilla Lady, a standing ovation. Haji was an expert in her shining dress. She took the microphone lieutenant and made the customary bell. Rising from it, the music played from the speaker. Again, an upbeat tune played, giving the audience a jolt of energy. He began to sing, the audience clapped the tune. Please tell me you like me, I can't get by without you. The audience danced the song, some singing, others smiling. Really useful of having touched their hearts. The crowd gave Haji standing ovations before smiling at the reception. Haji returned to the table, and the rest of the musicians seemed deep in conversation. Haji Z, do you want to go to Manchuria? Woman dressed right approached Haji from the table. Manchuria, soured, why would I want to die in that hell? It's not about working in the factories, trust me. None of us want to do that. It's about forming somewhere else, better for us. There's barely credit by Japan, and the homeland wasn't much better. When do you plan on leaving? When we have enough money. See, there's not really a lot happening as far as the politics. We haven't really had any decisions to potentially change it. Wave false hope at the soldiers. Jerry's conduct in the military had dried up faster than the Saharan drought to start to have real repercussions, but he knew that there were at least one of the last few hopes for the two detectives. The entire government and military were gunning to seize evidence and shut down the investigation. Gary knew that they were all in far deep places good now. They would see justice or die trying. They'd take any help they could to see what was happening. Several of his old Chonex people who had once considered true friends flat out refused to meet with him. Eventually, however, he had met a few of them, those who knew there was no other option. The officer was simple. They and their soldiers in the Army and Navy would safeguard evidence pertinent to the investigation. In return, their reputation could be safeguarded and perhaps they would survive and make it out to the other side after this whole debacle settled down. Every time he met the officer, he knew it was a lie. The people he talked to were so desperate for any chance to escape that they agreed. Even hope that they deep down was false was better than the chasm they face currently. Could I just wish they could never put on such a situation in the first place? One last time, old friends smile at the minister as he offers transparent appeasement at best. It was really the best they could manage, given the dire straits that every branch of the government were in. Even an offer like this could easily be the best one the Diet might receive. After all, they were on their brink too, and they would have to take any opportunity possible to try and save themselves as soon as the entire government collapsed around them to a boiling sea of corruption and disorganization. The proposal was simple. For it to be long-winded and noble to flatter the Diet, when the conflicts of interest elsewhere in the government and the possibility of further damage, the Diet was the best organization left to safeguard evidence regarding the investigation. The corporation would surely shield them from much of the upcoming chaos, and their assistance would prove dedication to justice and the innocence of many Diet members. Safeguard the evidence from corrupt, prying eyes elsewhere in the government Navy, reaping all the benefits of doing so. Touchy and kind of whether to be just rep. Fully put into a sense of urgency and desire to remain safe that the Diet members all felt it would be enough to not lie, at least for the moment. Flattery is an ever powerful tool. Wink at the bureau. Tachi was tired. He had been working nonstop for little months now. He surely could not remember the last time he'd sat properly. He had gotten 5 hours of sleep a few weeks ago, and it felt like an internal slumber compared to what he's usually running on. His general tiredness made it extremely difficult to conduct a proper meeting with outside representatives, which is exactly what Tachi was trying to do. A lot hung on this meeting. If the bureau chose not to comply, it would be the straw that broke the camel's back. Tachi decided to, for once in his entire role, to cut and talk frankly. No more fire language and dancing around what was really on the table. Out the officers, so the Bureau of Public was hissing these swords and safekeeping events so that the hostile and potentially corrupt forces in the government could not seize them. In exchange such moments that the evidence was secured, the investigation could be turned to politically benefit the Bureau. His front-up manner surprised the people he was meeting with, but the response was promising. They continued their endless game of double meetings and committing vague half-statements, but Tachi was able to gather what they were accepting the deal. He left the building with a tad of options and resolved to take a nap somewhere else. It might just help us. Release the bait. As Hachi spoke into the microphone, anxiously watching aside. His voice was trembled with the sense that every word he gave to the radio waves could be quoted in Japanese history forever. The inner circle of the government, the investigation team selected the release of the Deduction invoices history and extensive documentation is not airtight one. It's extraordinary circumstances beside threaten the future of the entire nation itself. He ends the broadcast and sends the files to the officials, listening to shock. And in less than an hour later, the three agencies are set afire. The crimes of the Army, Navy, and Diet implicated with dozens of pieces of evidence for every transgression in government hearing and filed and are already set in order to acquire the damning records. The hall of Shoki are filled with organized shouting and the explosive screaming of those named, each agency clamoring for its access, each giving different reasons on how they become fit to secure it. For the good of the Japanese people and the emperor, it seems that the desperation will be for naught. Can there even be a victor? Vidcon repeat. Was any hope in this crisis being resolved calmly and diplomatically? It's gone now. The common front entrusted with the information has completely collapsed upon itself. Government officials have fallen upon each other like a pack of starving rats, stalking and praying at night, sensing weakness at their brethren. Cultivated contact from the police have put in effort and now offer to help out all three agencies with their pursuits. The giant bureaucracy and as these controlling Japan will soon find themselves trapped by the rule they themselves made. NC have already hastily granted wide open access to the police investigation team, quickly moving to secure all of the transcription. The hearings held themselves have resulted in the granting of access to voluminous incendiary material surrounding the agencies dealing with each other. As all three players smear Shell's allegation evidence, each hand of the puppet masters above will never be clean again. Let's see what trouble they get themselves into. Tumbling down, Prime Minister implicated in making concessions in over 30 key areas of military autonomy. Deputy Keto recently resigned, proven to be accepted hundreds, thousands of bribes from foreign security ego territory, hundreds of names more from the army, from the navy, from Diet, all complacent. They're coming forward say alpha of information horrifically failed. Those of names only grows. Desire to be in the know. No. It's only a matter of time before the headlines of newspapers will blare with cries of corruption and pictures, ears, hearing past or best efforts of censorship. Situation has been evidence that any hope of controlling damage had been forgotten. The past could never be forgotten as efforts begin to collapse and their covenant reaches to its end. It seems that a new era for Japan is about to dawn. What's done is done. The government has set everyone and itself down. It all returns to nothing. The accountants knew. Everyone was afraid now. The central board was riddled with notes of various fonts and styles, and the corners of the room were trodden to half to dust, but no one even dared to make small talk. The energy was channeled into work so frantic it seemed like a burst of public madness. Talk veered and jolted between talks of leads and the next step, the next agency to find. Japan and Tachi found solace in their most recent routine. Probably conducted an accounting audit, an uninvolved neutral agency had to be found, and they had devoted themselves to finding it. With a book of notes, official auditing agencies cutting crumbs in Japan in hand, they holed themselves up in rooms for a week. Working their way past the screams of data, slowly the web began to unravel. Accountants involved had covered their checks with seemingly competence, but certain irregular patterns were suspiciously similar to others. If to be proven to link into a accounting firm, the firm would be supposed to be compromised. The name of the firm was crossed out in the books, and the search would continue. Name by name, number by number, the anonymity of accountants began to collapse. List of books grew shorter, and broke into pieces, which shrunk and shrunk and shrunk again. Monikatari woke up early, and as was his nature, took a browse through the cross-written book in the hall, and then another. He managed with great effort to keep from screaming. Instead, he sunk into his chair, half sobbing, to be found to be worried by Tachi. Every single name on the book had been crossed out. Oh my god. Things had been quiet for longer than they had been in weeks when a messenger appeared at the front of the department. His message was short and Jersey lever. The government would comply with investigators forcibly built. He brought with him dozens of binders, each big enough to carry perhaps years worth of data. They were quickly dropped off from representatives left. Shindai were quickly informed. They tried each other for a moment, sharing a glance of Simon's eagerness, fear, confusion, before standing up and heading down to grab binders. A few trips back and forth to gather them all. Each grabbed the top binder from their stack and started to read. Each of their binders contained the same general kinds of info. It was not pretty. All the chances were true. Paper after paper documented truly staggering amounts of money flowing from the Navy, Army into the account of politicians. Further they read, the higher profile names became. Soon they were no longer truly reading reports, but skimming them and noting every single name they came across. Not a single innocent person was mentioned from the front to the back. I picked up another binder, having already gotten through several and started to read. This one's different, however. This did not document any or politicians the same way as the other. It's full of government order report on the state of corruption. It had been chartered and viewed by the heights in the government and tossed aside. A single note of the inside of the report was to be archived in a high clearance storage or forgotten for the security of Japan, not for the security of the people running it. The rot sinks deeper. They all knew. Shinzo gave a brief presentation, showing no emotion and leaving as quickly as possible. He found in the morning, dead for approximately 4 hours. He was on his side, kneeling over into a shadow pool of his own butt. His hands gripped the hilt of a very old and very expensive Wakashi, a centuries-old antique in one of the most prized possessions. His face was frozen in a sad frown. His eyes were empty, dead, when he first announced his resignation. The police quickly rushed to inform his son, but they found him missing too. They frantically discovered that he had skipped downtown on in less than an hour after father's body had been officially found. He was on his way to Italy, officially on business. The truth was because his entire world was collapsing around him. Little chance of catching him out, and even less reason in trying. A few hours later, yet another heap of documents emerged. The Mizuki Corporation was now shown to have almost certainly assisted the government, army, navy in their operations. They used their business expertise and many assets to shuffle money around, skim just enough for money nose, and keep anyone who might object off the scent. They had even audited the vast majority of accountants involved in order to keep suspicion of him. Every level of power was not implicated in solid evidence. Even hardly an innocent soul remained. That he was without sin cast the first stone. Dang. So, who was it? Carly poured a glass of whiskey for himself and immediately drank it down before pouring himself another and offered one to Tachi. The younger one rarely accepted. He had been avoiding alcohol as much as he could over the past days, given the concentration needed for his work. But he just couldn't take it anymore. He took the glass with a mumbled thanks and savored the harsh flavor. Us ranking officer poked in his head and delivered some more papers. Kura initially tried to decline, saying it was just put him into the slide that he could get to in due time, but the officer said that it was different. This had just come from the TNO clique himself. That got Cutter to stand up and snatch the papers right away. The officer's hands. He struggled to keep his hands steady as he ran down the paper. He sat and sat down before handing the tiny stacks to Tachi. The young detective read over them as well, and the Cutter in shock. The clique was now agreed to cooperate with the investigation fully. Anything the team asked for, as long as it was relevant to the case, could be delivered. All they wanted in exchange was a guarantee of safety. No clique would be secure, and in return, everything and everyone else would be fair game. Pour another glass. The verdict. The final hearings were a miserable affair. Each of them was just an hour after hour, and details of truly. Oh, I forgot to pause. Oops. Hour after hour of details of truly hideously, stunningly corrupt affairs of nearly every branch. Oh, I lost my place. Nearly every branch of the nation. After they were completed, the last pieces of evidence were finally been officially compiled, revealed, and were incorporated into the report. The report was titanic, large enough to make one wonder if every citizen of the empire had been accused. After a final day of nervous preparation and finalization, the report was released. By the next day, literally hundreds of arrest warrants had been issued. Diet members, cabinet members, politicians, businessmen, previously admirable figures were all stopped and bought into as mere criminals. They were joined by a staggering amount of generals, admirals, and officers, both major and minor. A good number were yet to be captured. They continued to trickle in as the fallout grew harsher. The corporation was the absolute blink of crabs. The messenger raiders remaining the ship had been incarcerated. A little remained was extraordinarily unprepared to deal with this, teetering and would be knocked over by a slight breeze or push, and was mere keen to a city shredding a hurricane. Every single pointed to a collapse in consumer confidence. There was no coming back from Mizuki Corporation. There was no coming back for anyone. Origin flows with light. Economic wars. The men stood by the sill calmly and waited for their turn to jump. The Tokyo Exchange Secretary. Okay. So are we not getting a new focus tree? We'll be actually pretty disappointed if we don't get a new focus tree. Come on. Mr. Kim had difficulty in most states controlling his students. The schools in Incheon were not well funded, especially for Koreans. Not only did the ministries put extra pressure to emphasize Japanese cultural education, but any classes beyond conceptual were for the most part non-existent. Paying the teacher to watch his bright students spend his class in boredom, craving a more rigorous curriculum, perhaps he felt they needed a more inspiring class. Yet, their final chemistry course would be a lesson in the creation of drug and beard candy. All through the week, Mr. Kim practiced the recipe in his home, consulting his retired consultant in town. They bring in humid weather. Once he felt he could acquire a solid grasp, Mr. Kim went out and drew money for saving, enough to make sure every student could make their own, and then some. Beyond professional, at least the kids would enjoy it. His pupils lacked the patience he had for the candy to turn into wispy strings that masters could make. The joy in their eyes for a real experiment could never fade from Mr. Kim's memory. He had a chance today not to just recite and memorize what the Japanese people felt was best, but to create something truly Korean. The taste of freedom is the best meal of all. Recharting in the air, Sato turned the radio up, letting the soft musings of the violin, the pluckers of the guitar, and the whispers of the Christian guide her to sleep. Beams of light shone through her window, giving her warmth. She knew the song well. It was the Street of Dawn, sang by Kyoto National. Sato let her eyes droop as Toto began to sing through the speakers. It was illegal to be listening to this. Korean wasn't allowed on the radio, but something attracted her to the music. Her friend Conrad let her borrow some of the records and soon fell in love. The music stopped suddenly, replaced by yelling, ripping Sato out of her sleep before it could start. Let's go. What are you doing? A voice, only presumed was a radio, suddenly grunted out. A second later, a loud thud was heard. Little blinkers, unsurprised and somehow surprised that this happened. Her temple. Now she have to find another station that played her music. Probably more rest happening as she sat there. Cleaning herself with listening to music. What to do? What to do? She turned to another station and lied down on the couch. Huh. Um. The old guard. When Jew rarely got visit from her grandmother, the train fare was pricey for her parents, and the older woman could ever more difficultly caring for them in her old age. Tell stories to her and Junio of the old Korean. She watched as she's prayed with the last king, Sun Jung. This was time was no different. The archaic village has not changed one bit, save for a few more homes with the electric lights. One Jew's grandmother greeted them with huge hugs and kisses, as she always did. The family enjoyed a simple but fulfilling dinner. The octogenarian returned to the table after some time, revealing a splendid set of clothes. Grandmother, that's Hanbok. There are pictures of them in our history book. She modeled her young grandmother before handing the outfit to her mother. It was her own handbook, sewed by her youth's great grandmother. Daniel ran his hands along the soft cloth, flickering in the frayed tassels that hung from the skirt. Wonju could only look in awe. The clothes may have been fit for a museum display, but she felt her sense of duty wore at least once. Only the old folks wore them in the cities, where most people followed the new fashion for Tokyo. Holding it to her body, she began a position of nearly the same. The sleeves may have been fixed, but it was a perfect fit otherwise. But when she returned to back to say the dress brought only curiosity and amusement by her friends, they joked what would look like a peasant from the history books, museum dummy. And when one Jew could let out the insults slide, however they were intended, perhaps the world was not ready for the old fashioned to come in style again. Different than most in years of school children, a culture's colors fade away. Let's see. Wow, China has a much bigger focus than us. Or maybe we're just waiting. Oh, okay, maybe the fall of Eno. In the wake of the recent scandals following the uncovering of widespread corruption in the government, a recent political earthquake has shaken the very core of the Japanese empire. Every newspaper in Japan, the entire of the sphere, is reporting that His Excellency Prime Minister Inohara has been forced to resign following a vote of no confidence in imperial diet. This is rapidly spreading around the world as concerns rise about a possible shockwave of political instability spreading to all of Asia. The possibility of Eno itself as minister was a result of strenuous compromise, resulting from an attempt to contain the influence of the imperial Japanese army and the civilian government by finding a mediation between the various wings so you can say. However, such a fragile situation will scatter, and Japan's delicate political equilibrium has been gravely upset. Few counters dare make contention about the future in such a volatile situation, but the gears of Japanese diplomacy are already starting to set up system motion back to the crisis. Hirohito becomes the leader of the fascism party. Okay. Oh, wow. So we have like the actual emperor. Okay. A new pilgrimage. Don Lee had spent the final years in the hills around the Yulai River, patrolling as a small band of liberators from the corrupt Japanese who had run his country like a plantation. The NAGUA was splintered from across the wide plains of Manchuria. A few cells hidden deep in the Korea, across the wide plains of Manchuria. Hidden deep in the Korea's remaining force and villages. Radio message told of a mid-level Japanese officer. Okay, I feel like this is about to be like Korea's about to revolt because of all this stuff about it. But okay, we'll see. This after as one of Korea's greatest symbols, the rebel felt the death of his foe At its base, would it be fitting in for another cog machine that ripped the land belonging to him and every other Canadian subjection? From our cop, he saw a long line of cars near the mountain. Sir, they don't look like IGA trucks to me, one man spoke up. Then we sent some not crazy looks to me getting out. Not just man, family, flying trails and red, Korean and Japanese. Welcome to heaven like campground and cottages. Spin the right the more I looked. Keep rubbish bins scattered about, tacky homes by the sacred lake, and smoke from the various points. Campfires, sanctified place turned into not even to the museum, but tourist locale. Gun to weep, his spare hand reaching for the old pistol he kept by his side. Grooves familiar to he touched. Decay his life against the Japanese, and they had become so secure they vacationed in his country. He could only watch the put the spiritual in Korea. He would another spot for the passengers to make money. Surely nothing is sacred. Yeah, they're definitely getting ready to revolt. A new prime minister. Okay. Pause. There we go. Right. Emergency meetings have begun in the House of Peers and the House of Representatives to find a replacement for Eno. Japanese politics are dominated by the Taisei Yokanzai, the party itself brutally split among numerous rival cliques, each representing different interest groups within the vision for the future of the empire and the future. While the emperor nominates the prime minister, that has massive influence over his majesty's decision. That can always vote a candidate they don't like out of office. However, most commentators, both foreign and domestic, agree that the new PM will be chosen soon, as occurred when Tojo and Kido foresters on in the past. Two major candidates have sprung forth in the ranks of Yokai. Keiya Kanori and Nikita Yokai. Keiya, formerly a Minister of Finance, belongs to the Faction Conduct team, reform bureaucrats looking for this tradition and state intervention in Japanese economy. At the same time, removing the less military influence from government Japan. The other one, Akita, comes from a conservative wing from the Yokan side, to which Prime Minister also belongs. To the party closest to the army and much less prone to reform. So we want Akita, right? To read that state intervention. Yes, we'll go with Akita. Okay, these guys are at war. Can we send you help? Free civilian factories. Let's get some more oil being produced. Akita tries his hand. When the conservatives Akita's has always been a prominent figure, so his bid for prime minister was a natural appointment after the fall of the previous government. Akita had been playing his cards more and more openly, appearing in interviews on television and newspapers more and more frequently. He was a conservative, especially for his commitment to stability and preservation of policies that were successful during Eno's time. Several reforms and continued working relationship with the Imperial Armed Forces and maintaining a strong hold over the nation of the sphere. One base for support is among the more liberal members of Kansai, such as Akita seemed to be the only man capable of containing ambitions and pursuing projects of the reform bureaucrats. However, Akita has been trying to find some relation and compromise with Keiya's faction, and with successful compromise, no matter how weak, would be a major victory for him and the conservatives. Positionally, Kansai becoming stronger and stronger, seems to know that he'll be the next man for the prime minister. Kishi sabotages Akita. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Kishi sabotages Akita. An open letter published by the popular newspaper Shoei was causing another shaft in Japanese politics, largely because of a man signing it. Kishi Nobusuke, the former Japanese administrator in Manchuria, Kishi has maintained a strong influence in Japanese politics, one of the leading representatives of the reform bureaucratic faction. However, the highest esteem he enjoys among the general public, and especially among Japanese political class, have allowed him to seriously set back Kida's effort to gain the position of prime minister. And his support, Kishi harshly criticized Kida and conservatives supporting it, painting him as a weak-willed, political lame duck that will bring further to the nation, denying Japan the reform it needs, while at the same time drawing a direct lane from the corruption of the government. Akita, self often viewed as a protege of Ino. Such a strong attack has weakened Akita's position in Yokansai and attempts to find another mediation with other faction artists to win the future. There's no way he'll become prime minister now. Mercury lamps. She rested on his cold stone bench, the wind blowing south through the garden. In her arms cradled a grandchild, Tsuyu, nestled softly in a white blanket. Her legacy, the tree behind her, rustled suddenly. Starting her back and startled Isugi on reflex, Jin rocked her, cradled her to sleep, and yet remained fussy. Her short arms reached towards the blue sky, softly hushing, nor reassuring that everyone was all right, would calm the child as she cooed and called no one, not one and everyone. She wondered what Sibyl would be like when she got older. Would she even be able to see? Sorry, would she even see her reach adulthood? Jen shook her head, admonishing herself, but there was far more immediate concern. What if her very own grandchild didn't understand Korean? What would happen then? She may be big now, but what when she attends school? A song came to her head, a favorite of hers, and sang it to Scott. When the mercury lamp bloomed in the evening, or swept the garden, bursting her with bright flowers, of white, of red, of blue. She took Scott's eyes, the brightest flowers of them all. I'm pacing this path I used to walk alone with you. She cares, Square's face smiling down at her. Child smiled in turn, showing off her glowing teeth. Young kissed her forehead, touching her nose. Softly the mercury lamp did not change. The wind picked up as Eugene walked toward her. She yawned, and he tucked her further into the blanket. You don't seem to have as well, she chuckled as Square's eyes dropped further and further. In the light of the mercury lamp, Square fell asleep, her only movement being her breaking. Jin rose from the bench, walking nervously, placing cigarettes in her cradle. Eugene walked it slowly and walked away, returning to the lights, and closed the door silently. Sweet dreams, child. Alright, Deadlock. So far, it seems that every attempt to put opponents from an office's most failure. Political infighting in the South Secret Side prevented too much against Kaya Keita from getting a strong enough base of support. His attempt to dominate the Prime Minister by directly going for the Emperor has been slain by the Diet. A dreaded word is being repeated more and often. Newspaper, television, numerous variants all come with the same meaning. Political deadlock, impasse, stalemate, deadlock. The influence has been accompanied by an aura of pessimism spreading across the Japanese government. The country largely fears the unclear political direction might have ill effects on the economy as well. A solution must be found, and at times like these, the only solution can be compromise of a particular type, one that leaves all parties unsatisfied. Keto suggests Kuribadoya. What is that? Okay, alright, so resolve the political snag. The Japanese government has found itself in the old acquaintance of Japanese politics that flipped from line. Former Minister and Lord Keeper Provincial Kicho Kido, a staunch reform Burkat and Ino's predecessor. Kido had largely remained in the shadows of Japanese politics during recent years and being ousted following his aggressive attempts to eliminate RGA influence in the Philippine government. Kido set forth to the emperor proposing the name of Kure Baju, a possible president for Ino, a relatively unofficial member of the Kansai would have served as a minister in Kito's cabinet. While Kito's strong influence in the Privy Council might mean that Bino himself get nominated Prime Minister of the Emperor himself by passing diet, this already sparked a strong reaction to the section of the Kansai that are more hostile to Kito. Perhaps the Emperor will step in. Don't forget. This afternoon, the sun shone through the windows of Juice's apartment as 15 children were thrown about, sitting on the chairs or couch as a cushion on the floor. Now repeat after me. You still put the pointer at the chalkboard. Seagulls don't cry over the sea. The children leaned close to the board, trying to read and mimic her. Her desk creaked and moved closer to the front of the room. Seagulls don't cry over the sea. The students squinted their eyes, struggling to read. Stopped herself from yelling. These soldiers still doing her learning. They will eventually get it. I hope we've studied this week. We are going to reciting this to me one by one next week. She warned the students. Unintelligibly affirmative erupted from the students as Juicer returned to the chalkboard. The pointer swept across the second time the character as Juicer read it. Tears are wet in the water bowl of the Jigori. She read out. This time her students reacted to it, nearly perfectly nodding as she moved a small boat to the far horizon. Oh, today you're not gone. The teacher pointed to a picture depicting exactly what she recited. One boat in the far horizon. Oh, today you're not gone. The students repeated. Nice work. I'll be picking on students to read part of the lyrics. Right, you're first. So the students read the lyrics with giving things go a bit slower next time. As the last of the students left, Jisa prayed for her success that she didn't forget where they came from. Korea, not Japan. Nope, still nothing. Yep, okay. Just making sure I can't scroll a bit more and the unified statement has been released by the members of the Diet of the Tosai Yukansai, stating that the party will not support the nomination of majority as Prime Minister, instead immediately passing a vote of no confidence, signaling the end of Budo's tenure before the event began. Such a bold statement is especially surprising, saying it might mean defying the will of the Privy Council and by extension the Emperor himself. The members of the Privy Council are already calling this a bluff, but Yukansai wants to be left free to play its petty political game. There is no way through obtaining tackling the Privy Council in such an outrageous way. or some were advising caution. The Imperial Diet is serious. The Luminal Conference will be a devastating blow to the Privy Council's political authority, just gutting Keto and risking his position as Lord Keeper of the Privy Council. This puts Keto in quite a difficult choice. Should he back down or call a Diet's bluff? We have to back down. Alright, we'll let them back down because he's a reformist, and we want to try to keep the conservative mainstream in power. Insider. The recent sighting of the Japanese government has found itself a source of embarrassment for the whole nation. In the eyes of Asia and of the world, hidden negotiations between the Diet and their Privy Council, as well as within the Yokunsai itself, has so far gone nowhere. However, another group of politician weasels is negotiating the clique of Yokunsai closer to former Prime Minister Inoue. While he himself was a national conservative, much like his protege Kennedy, he was able to create a stable political Yukon by compromising with opposing factions of the Yokunsai, which reformed Burats and ruling Rokea. His involvement in his talks has been largely on the quiet side, but it might be the key to solving this mess. A bit ironic. We'll get that done. All right. I guess worst case scenario would be Kea getting in charge, right? Well, I guess not the worst case scenario, but so the reformists are the National Socialists. That don't make any sense, but okay. A new suggestion. Newspaper suffered no options table, literally proposed by Ino Hiro himself. Kachi, a former minister of Ino's cabinet, is well known for his completely equal distance from all the major factions close to Kansai. Lack of charisma and commitment to a factional preventing him from initially being considered as a candidate to replace Ino. Whereas in this particular situation, she might be purposes to fill the political offices of Ino Kansai. Direction from Kate's and Kida's clique have been lukewarm, but it appears that they might be ruling no other option to get out of as mayor. Kido, Kachi, and the Privy Council all expressed no agreement with Kachi's nomination. While nobody is truly satisfied or happy, every person seems to be more likely that she will become the new Prime Minister. Alright, he becomes Prime Minister, it looks like. Dang, it looks like these guys are done. Yep. Okay. Looks like we can't save these guys. Kiichi has become Prime Minister. After one round of meetings and negotiations, he reflects the Imperial Diet finally found a way to the political dead end. Kachi Achi has been chosen for the Emperor to fill the position of Prime Minister with nearly nameless apart from the Chancellor. You could side with various wings of the party that barely fought until the end until it was united at last. These papers across Japan's sphere celebrate his appointment as spent to Kansai, representing the will of the nation, overcoming petty factions and political infighting. Cautious and opinions spreading across Japan. Those in the economic side, no self his opinion, let alone for relaxing. I'm sure he'll do a good job. Wow, he looks basic. He doesn't even have a description. Alright, the interregnum, just a few days after an interim Prime Minister, the vague air of optimism spreading Japan dissolved in the wind. President forming cabinet calls it endless bickering into the Kansai, ending up with a patchwork cabinet made up of ministers from several different cliques that barely wish to speak to each other. What's worse, it seems the members of the multifaction party plot to overthrow Yachi's government. The Imperial Diet, the Privy Council, Tulsi Kansai are all impeccable wolves turning on each other after being left without a leader. Five of you leading up to the paraded on newspapers and public appearances. Fortunately, the party stands united behind Itachi. The truth is far different. The struggle for power in the Japanese government is only starting, and no one knows how it will end. Chairman has begun. You are a fool. The aging captain has figured out the truly of his younger aides. The map laid out before him detailed the situation. Right was the Blackfoot. After having lost the ridge and the surrounding hill, defense had already been established, and it was only a matter of time before Blue would achieve victory. Quibbles and thin arrows pinpointed to weak spots, and the thicker arrows planned out the finishing blow to the right. Just a little more, they would win. The captain was met with hot silence, but instead of the music, what the hell is going on? he asked to no one in particular. The music being played was actually good. Of all things considered, the sound of trumpet was the strong voice, and the fact it was upbeat all contributed to how good it was. Too, too bad it was interrupting his exercise. The captain turned the dial to control the frequencies, all were playing the same music. He heard a snicker to his right. As the voice said, the Japanese point captain there for initiative to the aid. He the woman declining the captain a full. What's the matter with you? The captain pointed at the aid near nothing, nothing, sir. Aid stiff and trying to leave his cuffs having the tune was actually bobbing the head to the chorus. You are full, you are full. You imagine addressing captain privately. Finally, you are full. A song in his head continued. You're a cold man who does not know my mind. Okay, let's see. Okay, the national piety. It can be difficult to distinguish between truth or rumors and the whispers echoing the diet. Many deputies to have a knack for them telling when conflict is brewing behind the scenes. As the lame duck prime minister watches impotently besides main factions sharpen eyes and try to figure out the best angle of attack on their enemies. Chief among them are the reform bureaucrats. The leader Kaya has not given up on imposing a new order on Japan's economy, with or without political support. Independent deputies weigh the possible benefit from supporting him with the dangers of making an enemy of Akita and his conservative bloc. Independent deputies that have freed themselves factional shackles are being dragged at their will into the concise civil war. This stance has been on both sides complicated by the emergence of a third power bloc. Republicans struggled for quite some time to establish a third path between the conservative stagnation and reform bureaucrats dangerously intertwining of the government industry. Small but growing liberal factions seek support for the former naval officers program. Obtaining coming from Japan's political elite, the corruption and disability of Kansai can be brought to an end. On somewhat part of the conservative coalition, the liberal faction has begun given a shot in the arm by the failure of both conservatives and reform bureaucrats to grab the prime minister's office. Smelling blood in the water, liberals have begun dreaming up a renewed vigor. Though through all this, rumors of that former Prime Minister Kido Kaji's has not yet given up his radical agenda. The majority of his reform bureaucrats support K publicly. The perspective of transformed Yukonsan remains a very appealing one. Fusion of political economic control with the army backing remains an intoxicating ideal to the chamber's most ambitious. Rumor goes all sides are preparing their move. It seems the term ceasefire is ending. Takagi's gambit. In the name of love. For Zheng King, nothing could be better than sitting in the record store listening to merchandise in the city of Nanjing ambled. On the outside of her window, all the likes of businessmen, salarymen, and people just looking to get by past her window. A growing pile of poems, the best prose that she could muster, stood tall on her desk. Ready cops and the smallest breath touched it. It was hunched over her desk, calculating how many sales she would have to make to cover rent. Deep in thought, her train of thought broken by the ringing of chimes, and the paper tower collapsed. Citrax could watch as the customer tried to save her stack of papers, only for it to fall over the floor. Looking up, she was a deputy officer had been walking to her store. Face pale, she shot up. Do you need any help, sir? She cringed at her Japanese. Sorry for causing that mess. Do you need any help? Officer seemingly apologetic and embarrassed. Couldn't nod. In a few seconds, the sack was reassembled and divided into chunks to avoid an incident. Do you happen to sell trot? The officer suggested. Watch out for its link, filling up records. There should be some Imaji here. She pointed to another rack. There's Kanwaji and Sri Suk Job. The officer nodded, reaching for the massive cover. From the corner of her eyes, could see him picking out a few records as she picked out 10. She left the records at her desk, telling him to know her that was done. He came in a few seconds, holding a bunch of records in his arm. Is there any way you could package this? He asked. I'll pay extra. She came out and producing a box from under her desk. She placed the box and was 500 yen. She got 550. As the man left his store, he stopped him. What do you buy chart records anyways? Aren't they illegal? Afterwards, on both seemingly acknowledging her argument and smiled fondly. Therefore, my wife. Lation Wilderness Resort. One of Square's associates, More Ventures is the Circumvent Wilderness Resort in the Aleutian Islands. Formerly a backwater and one of the most far-flung regions of the Japanese Empire, Aleutian Islands become sort of a... We own the Aleutian Islands? Really? Anyway, that's... Oh, finish it. Alright. Islands was somewhat of a mini business haven for those who can't make it to Tokyo. Prior to the establishment of the Security Report, Islands was a seedy underblight. Ironic given its firstly to Japan. American and Canadian contraband goods flow through the tiny ports which Titans call that. Lucky strikes of Playboy magazines. Of course, it was until the IGN area committee replaced Alva, causing them pair up. Since then, the Conference and ability turned into a haven for Japan thrill seekers under one of School's many affiliates. From the extreme hiking to snowboarding and winter fishing in the rigid north, note many of the former criminals and Company sellers still eke out their livings there, just under a new shiny uniform and a veneer of actual company. Quentin self-manages himself so much on this project. Though anybody who's got money to pay knows that there's more than resort profits in salmon hunting, tabloid-friendly adrenaline rush ventures. Despite all that claim, no truth the resort profits change away dirty money. This says from the first minute between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. every Wednesday, and will discover not much has changed since. Trip to the wilderness. Wow, we control part of the Aleutian Islands. I didn't know that. Let's check here. Yep, still nothing. But we have ran out of time for this episode. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.